You lazy wealth podcasters, I have got a wonderful treat for you today as a special thank you for all of you dedicated listeners. And even if you're a new listener, I have got the wonderful Charlie Panayi here. Well, not quite here. He's sort of chilling out in his luxury pad in London by the looks of it, or one of his luxury pads in London. But
this is one of my offices on the Isle of Wight.
Oh, it's his Isle of Wight office. Isle of Wight's a really good
Yeah.
tax haven for any of you that are interested. That's going to be covered in our paid content at a later date. So Charlie and I met, when was it, Charlie? A few months back in Dubai?
Yeah, probably was 3 months-ish. I don't know anymore.
Yeah,
Time flies.
Time flies when we're having fun, mate. We've kept in touch regularly. How we met was at a small fee paid networking event, if I remember rightly. It was something like 30 quid British pounds.
I don't even think it was £30, to be fair, probably less than that. But yeah, give or take.
Yeah, it wasn't sort of, you got to spend £1 million to get introduced, was it? It was just the normal sort of, was it speed networking that we met at? I can't remember.
It was speed networking, which was the first time I've ever done that, actually.
And do you remember that crazy guy? What do you want? Tell me now. Yes. And he was throwing his card and he was sweating everywhere and he was shouting at everyone.
The dentist, wasn't he?
He was the dentist, that's right. Yeah, the orthodontist he was. Oh my God.
Yeah, he had unlimited energy. His energy was out there.
A very high energy individual with probably very low stocks of lidocaine in his cabinet, I imagine.
Yes, quite forceful. Yeah.
So we met in Dubai a few months ago. We never met each other before now, and we've continued that conversation after the network. We've talked about some business opportunities together. We find ourselves here in the Lazy Wealth podcast today. And the reason for me inviting Charlie along, I'm going to let him introduce himself shortly anyway. Really great guy. He has multiple businesses. He's a what we would call a serial entrepreneur. And he's a property developer, an investor. He's got other businesses outside of property. And I thought it would be really good for the network, for this community, to really sort of pick under the hood and have a look at what really it is all about being a lazy wealth creator. And I don't think lazy is probably the word I would use for people like us, but I think it'd be good if we allow people to have a look at your Instagram, which from memory is, let me get this right, Charlie_Panayi, but there's a silent I on the end of it. So don't look for Panayi, it's Panayi at the end. If you go and have a look there, have a look at what he's up to, because I tell you what, it'll be well worth a gander. Just don't send him any weird DMs because his missus gets very upset. Okay?
No, I get a lot of weird DMs, actually.
I can imagine. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about where you come from, Charlie, because there's obviously that UK twang there. So tell us a little bit about your backstory. What's gone on there?
So technically, I'm Greek Cypriot, but I grew up in North London. My dad fled Cyprus during the war, so typical thing. They all went to North London or Melbourne in Australia. So I ended up in London, and so really that was where I grew up. That's where I learned everything, really. I'd say growing up, I was in very much a working class family, I would say. I mean, the reality was my mum and dad worked 7 days a week. And anyone who, I don't know, some people may know Ridley Road Market. I pretty much grew up on Ridley Road Market.
What did they do, Charlie? What did your mum and dad do?
African Caribbean foods.
Okay.
Yeah, in the market. Do you know what? I always have fond memories of my childhood because, yes, I was at work pretty much every day from a toddler to when I went to school and then outside of school. But I genuinely did have to work. Well, I mean, I charged my dad, mind you. But
how much did you charge? Come on, spill the beans. Go on.
Well, I can't remember now, but I think I undervalued my services. That's for sure.
Like £2 a day, something like that.
Probably less than that. I think it was a Kit Kat. No, it wasn't. It was a Time Out bar and a can of Coke.
There you go. See, the memory comes flooding back now.
It was actually, yeah, you reminded me. Yeah, a Time Out bar and a can of Coke.
Not like a Roller Cola or a Panda Cola, but an actual Coca-Cola.
No, it was, and they had these KA drinks. They're called KA. I love them as well. So
I've still got one of them. The black grape KA drink is my favourite.
Well, we used to sell them, so that was my fee.
The African fruit coming in there, brilliant.
Yeah, so I did. I used to love it. I really grew up, and I mean, look, I saw my mum and dad work a lot and worked hard. But that is really where I grew up was in that market because you know it's like a big family. I know we watch EastEnders, which isn't really a market, but you know, it really is like a big family. Everyone in the market, but it's changed these days, mind you. But back in the day, everyone would know each other, and you'd all talk to each other, and you could roam the market. And as a kid, I could walk up and down. And, I used to price things and all sorts. So that was really where I grew up. But North London slash Ridley Road Market.
And obviously, growing up in North London, would you say that you come from a sort of a privileged background where have you got 5 cars in the drive? Are you in a 5-bedroom detached house? What's going on there?
I wouldn't. The honest answer is my dad wasn't really a showy person, and he still isn't. So It's quite tough to know really the real wealth of my father. So we didn't really grow up in a flashy way. Like I said, they worked 7 days a week. What I would say is I definitely felt privileged in terms of we would have a holiday every year. So every year we would go on holiday. And that was actually part of my driving force as a kid, because I remember all my friends never went on holiday. Some of them never went on holiday until they were an adult. So I do remember thinking, we didn't go on lots of holidays, but we did used to go on at least one good holiday a year. And I remember feeling lucky.
What was that sort of holiday? Just tell, where would you go?
Typically, it was actually back to Cyprus. So to be fair,
back home.
Looking back at it, my dad was probably skimping on the money because we had family and stuff there. But I did used to realise, my mum and dad work really bloody hard. And I used to go on holiday once a year, and like I said, my environment, the kids didn't really go on holiday. So I do remember. So you could say it was privileged somewhat, but I mean, it depends what you're comparing it to. If you're comparing it to a multi-millionaire with cars and I get everything I want, then the answer is no.
Fair enough. And this is obviously pre-EasyJet, pre-Ryanair, where you can now pick a flight to Cyprus for, I think, about 70 quid. Back in the sort of 80s, 90s, if you wanted to fly to Cyprus, you're talking a fair chunk of change back then, because, the budget airlines just didn't exist. So it would have been a relatively expensive thing to enjoy going out on holiday once a year. But the point really I'm trying to drive home here is that you can't go and get a small $1 million loan from your father like some certain president and so on. It's not that sort of environment where you go, oh, Dad, can you bung me a cheeky 50 grand and see where we go from here?
Do you know what? He was with me. I've got older brothers as well that he may have been different with. He was different with. With me, it was very much like if I wanted to go out and play on the weekend, I'd have to help him. He ended up from the African Caribbean's food market. He ended up making quite good money as the years went on. So he started investing in properties, and but I'd have to go and build a wall with him. If I wanted to go out, as a 7-year-old, you don't really appreciate that because I'm a kid. I want to go and play. But it did give me some good lessons in life. So that was how it was. Even he was a football manager. I played in an academy league for football, and he was the manager of the team. I just get dropped on the day of a game if I didn't tidy my room. It was ridiculous. He was a very old school Greek man who was very respect driven, probably sometimes too strict.
Bit disciplinarian, would you say? Sounds like it there. Okay.
Yeah, so you didn't really get anything really unless you worked for it. But that taught me good lessons, I would say.
And that sort of dovetails us really nicely into the now. So that tells us a little bit about your backstory, what you did, what you're about. Obviously, your father and your mum were really heavily influential in, I would argue, in where you've arrived at today, because they've given you that really good structure and that really thorough understanding of hard work. How has that sort of paid off now that you are where you are and you've reflected on it? So tell us a little bit about now, like what are you doing now? What are your schemes that you're building, or is there any businesses that you're doing? So talk us a little bit about that.
I mean, gosh, I do all sorts of things. So I agree. Like, I think my mum was a super inspirational person with her work ethic. So I was a really sad child. I was at 7 years old. I already started thinking about retiring. Quite a weird thing. Maybe I've got autism, maybe severe OCD. I don't know. But I genuinely did. And I think that was because of the holidays. That holiday used to give me that drive. And I think, well, I want to be financially free. So how am I going to do that? And again, I don't really know where the property side came from, but I decided I was going to buy properties. So I genuinely started saving from the age of 7. Easters, I used to say to my mum and dad, don't give me Easter eggs. Give me whatever you were going to spend on an Easter egg. Give me the money.
That's some dedication right there. That is, wow.
Yeah, I was super driven, and then I started working at 12 outside of school, and then I got a proper job, I call it, at 16, where I become an account director by 17. So I was managing a few £1 million worth of business at 17 for Europe's largest training and mystery shopping company. Um, so yeah, and then I bought my first house at 18. And to be fair, it just went from there. I learned lessons as I went along, as we all do. You I wouldn't say touch wood I've ever lost, but you live and you learn and you make mistakes and you think, right, okay, I'll do it differently next time. And then probably by the age of 25, I got to that financially free word, should we, as people use it.
What does that mean,
25,
Charlie? Because we bat that around. People like me and you, we say, oh, I'm financially free. Oh, I'm free. What does that really mean to a person who's listening into this podcast going, mate, I ain't got 20 quid in my pocket here. What are you talking about financially free? What does that really mean to you?
So I think obviously it can mean different things for different people.
Absolutely.
But to me, I think people get confused with my drive. Sometimes people thought I was driven by money, but the reality is my net worth hasn't really increased that much in the last 12 years because I give most of it away to charities. But for me, financially free was being able to do what I want when I want. So if my boss turns around to me or a board of company says, hey, you can't do this, I say, well, off you go. I will do what I want. And that doesn't mean that in an arrogant way or an ignorant way. It's just, I want to be able to look after myself when I want. If I want to go on holiday tomorrow for 2 months, I'll go on holiday tomorrow for 2 months. If I want to go away for a year, I'll go away for a year. I think people like you and I will always work. I don't think you can ever escape that. So even people sometimes probably get confused because when they hear someone say they're financially free, but then they see them working 24/7, that's because we enjoy it. That's not because I have to. It's because I really bloody enjoy it.
There's the thing. You've sort of hit the nail right on the head there, haven't you? I think when people talk to me and they say, I know you say you're financially free, but you were in this top, it says Lazy Wealth podcast. What's that about? Why are you doing that? You don't have to do it. No, I don't. I love doing it. I love what I do. I love the work I have. I love the businesses that I operate in, that I still operate in today. I don't need to be there, but I love being there. I love the buzz of being in that office and talking to the staff and meeting the clients. Why? It's just what I like to do. There's no financial incentive for me to do that. It's just my choice. And you hit on another really valid point from my point of view here. Working for somebody else and having them control your life. No, I do need you in the office today at 9 o'clock and you cannot leave until 6:30 because that project needs doing, or you have to clock in and out. I couldn't imagine anything worse than clocking in and out. Yeah. They're the sort of things that perhaps the people who are watching this or listening to this, they might be in that situation. And hopefully we're going to glean a little bit later on, like, how do we get to the positions that people like yourself and myself are in, and how does that work? So I love that you've just gone into that little bit of detail, what the difference between being financially free and not working. They're not the same thing. You can still work and be free.
Yeah, and that's the reality. That was my drive as a young kid, was to be financially free, not to be rich, to be financially free. Obviously, I know people that are here for money, and that's fine. I don't think that's a problem. And then fast forward to what I do today. Gosh, I do lots of things. I've got property companies, multiple property companies. I've got estate agents, management agents, media company, beauty companies, tech companies. I have a private community that I'm really enjoying being part of because I can make a real difference. And then I mentor people. But I also invest, and I invest with people. So people invest with me. Sometimes I invest for people with me, or I invest myself. So yeah, I have many hats, and I sit on the board of directors for the hospice, which is obviously a very large charity in the UK. So I'm one of the board of directors there. So yeah, I do a lot. Some people say, well, how the hell do you fit in? Your family, your football, because I still try and play football. People listening my followers.
They will say you try, you try hard.
They try. Yes, I still try to play football. Obviously, I do a lot of charitable challenges and events throughout the year. So yeah, people do think, well, how the hell do you fit it in? But the reality is just structure, understanding what time everything takes, and being accountable, really, not making excuses.
I mean, we talked in a previous podcast about setting goals for yourself and how to basically set yourself a year-long goal, but then separating it into monthly components and then into weekly components. Would you say from your experience, that's a worthwhile activity doing, or would you say, no, don't do that? What would be your thoughts?
I think so. I think when I was younger, I just wanted to be able to retire by 32. So it's quite a long plan there. To be fair, I'm just a massive action taker. So I got what I wanted. But I think the reality is the best way is to have short-term goals. Because when I hear someone, I started working with a gent called Callum a few years ago. And I remember him when he first met me, he was like, oh, I want to be rich. And I was like, well, what's rich? He's, I don't know, like a multi-millionaire. I was like, but is that a pound? Is that a million? Is it 10 million? I don't, what is it? And having this huge goal is great, but the reality is we need to get from A to B.
Yep.
And to get from A to B, there's actually lots of subcategories before then. So yeah, for me, short-term goals are great. Like if you separate them into years, i.e., a lot of property people, they're like, I'm going to own 50 properties. Okay, well, how many are you going to do this year? Let's focus on this year. How are we going to structure them? How are we going to scale that? And then we move on. So I think yearly targets are always really good. Obviously, I don't tend to get too down to the weekly stuff because I think everyone's different. I'm on about personal. I just think I'm overcomplicating it. But I think yearly for me is definitely there. And then we break it down into months because the problem is if you leave it 7 months, you're like, oh, crikey, I've not got anywhere near what my target was. But then you've got to try and do the rest of it within a short time frame. So it's key to not make excuses for yourself. I use the word excuses a lot, but so many people make excuses for themselves. They have a goal and then the month's gone by. Oh, yeah, well, this happened. Oh, but that happened. Well, look, get rid of your goal. And a really good trick that I find is quite useful to use on a daily purpose here is ask yourself the right questions. Now, what I mean by that is most people say, right, tomorrow I've got to do this, I've got to do that, what happens when you're saying I've got to go to the gym, I've got to do this, is you're going to constantly look for ways to get out of it. You're going to constantly make excuses. Whereas actually, if you just ask yourself the question, am I going to the gym tomorrow? It doesn't matter if you say yes or no. If you say no, fine. You might wake up feeling good and go to the gym. You're like, oh, that's a bonus. If you say yes, you just answered yourself a simple question and you will go. It's all about how the brain works. So for me, it's about having that year, splitting it down into months. And then I don't tend to, like I said, go short of the months because I think I might be overcomplicated. But within that month, it's about keeping yourself accountable every single day, asking yourself the right questions. Because we can all come off track. I as you just heard, I've got about a trillion plates spinning. So evidently, it's not always easy for me. As an entrepreneur, I've always got this idea and that idea and this idea and that idea. It's not feasible to be able to do all of them at the same time.
I totally understand that. Again, having very similar situation to yourself. I want to say something to you and I just want your instant response. So we haven't rehearsed this, by the way.
Okay.
So 40-hour work week, go.
Well, I don't like structure. So for me, I work what I want. If I want to work 80, then I work 80. If I want to work 2, I work 2. I think the problem with a structured 40-hour work week, in England, we like to copy Americans. We're probably about 10 years behind them, but we like to copy. And too many businesses are on about this. You've got to work 40 hours. If you're paid 40 hours, you mentioned it earlier, the clock in, clock out. It's useless. What I like to work with guys who work for me is, don't get me wrong, I want hard work. There's no two ways about that. But equally, it's give and take. If my sales director is pulling in X amount of business over 6 hours a day, then do I really care? Not really. Not really. End of the day. But if he's not performing and he's doing 6 hour days, then he's got an issue. So that's what I think of 40-hour weeks. I think they're outdated. I think people need to think about it logically about how do we get the best out of people in terms of work and where they work, why they work. Working from home full stop, I don't think is a good idea. Working in the office full time, I don't believe is a good idea. I think there is a hybrid approach. You mentioned the buzz of the office. I think if you let people be lazy, it's probably lazy wealth creation, but if you let people be lazy and sit at home all the time, let's be honest, it's easy to be distracted at home. Doesn't matter how good a setup you've got, you can get distracted. So I don't believe either of those work well. So yeah, 40-hour week for me is a bit of nonsense, really. I'm going to do what I want. But I do think employers probably need to become a little bit more. It's actually good for me because people that work for me never tend to leave. because I think they see the ones that realise it's give and take, they use it. Like I said about
Yeah.
my sales director, same as my one of the lettings managers, and yeah, they get it. If they hit the numbers, I don't care. I don't care.
Yeah. That's really interesting, that, because there are so many people out there that are not focusing on the right numbers. They're focusing on have you been in the office 35 hours this week? Have you been in the office 40 hours this week? Not the numbers of, have you hit your sales
I want
target
to say
this
something
week?
quite direct. The councils, they have this login thing on their laptop, don't they? What a load of nonsense. I mean,
And the NHS
and
do it as well.
I could
Yeah.
sit there. Oh, here's my finger. There you are.
Type,
Oh, I've worked.
type. Yeah.
What a
Yeah.
load of bloody nonsense. That's
How productive am I?
such a pointless thing. And this is what I mean. The UK as a we just aren't very logical.
Can you imagine a world where the local authority planning department are measured on how many planning applications they review,
Crikey.
rather than how many hours have you turned up to work today? Can you imagine how much we get Britain building?
Yeah, absolutely. This is what I mean. There's too many. Unfortunately, I'm not going to go into politics, but there's too many button pushers out there, and I think, and again, I think maybe people that looking at people like us who have managed to create wealth for ourselves sometimes do think, oh, they only work 1 hour a week because they're financially free, and I think it's and then also I get the other ones who try to be negative about entrepreneurs. I see some negative posts about saying, oh yeah, don't work 40-hour weeks, work 80 instead. There is some truth in that, but the reality is, if you're passionate about something, you enjoy it, then what's the bloody problem?
But I think that the thing that you've touched on before is this really important word, choice.
Yes.
Being told that you have to work 40 hours a week, and people like you and I choosing to work 80 hours this week, or sometimes, God forbid, 100 hours in certain weeks. I know I've certainly done that. I don't know about yourself, but that is a personal choice for me to do that. And that leads me on to my next impromptu question. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to give you 2 words, and I want you to give me your response to it. Again, completely blindsided.
Okay.
You ready for this?
Yeah.
Delayed gratification.
I mean, I think that's a really interesting point to make, actually. Not one I've been asked on here before, but I've talked about this in talks I've done before, delayed gratification. Too many of us want things here and now. Again, if we come back to the English, sorry, I sound like I'm being negative toward the English age, but
hey, don't be knocking our Englishness, you.
No, I am English, so don't worry. But I mean, we've gone into this environment in the last 10 years where we just want this right now, and we want it now. We're entitled to it now, but they don't understand the work to get to there. I call it, everyone. You saw itself delayed gratification. Sorry, but we've all got this greedy monkey in our heads, as I call it, and we all want it now. We all want it now. We don't want to wait to the delayed gratification. Well, I think that's super important, because my view on delayed gratification is you've got to teach yourself, and it takes time to really enjoy that and actually be willing to wait for the gratification, rather than thinking I've got to have it bang now, because it isn't overnight. I think people look at, again, successful people, Jeff Bezos and the Musks of the world, and they're probably thinking, oh yeah, they're lucky. Look at them, they're billionaires, they're trillionaires.
Just look, nothing else. Just look.
They don't see, and that iceberg analogy is used quite a lot, isn't it? But what they don't see is all of the nonsense that goes in underneath that.
All the failures, all those investors who said, no, you're an idiot, you don't know what you're talking
100%,
about.
Yeah, so they don't see the failures. And I think the failures are a big thing. And delayed gratification, if I'm answering it in the way you want to, is something that I think I probably, when I was 18, didn't appreciate so much, because I was so driven, and at that point I was already successful, and I was making lots of money, and I was buying properties, and I was doing this, and I was getting used to the instant gratification. I want it, I'm getting it now, and it probably started to come in my mid-20s when I achieved what I wanted. That's when I realised that isn't really what I wanted. And delayed gratification is something that you've got to work at and get used to, because I think some people want to start a business. I work, like I said, I mentor people, and certain individuals start this business and they think it should be successful instantly. It's not the reality. Most run at losses for the first year or two. So the reality is, you've got to get that used to your brain trained. You've got to train it. You literally train your brain.
Yep.
And there's skills and there's ways of doing it, obviously. But Yeah, it's an interesting one. I've not actually been asked that on an interview before, but yeah, that's an
There you
interesting
go.
one.
You've heard it here first, guys. The first delayed gratification question for Charlie. We've talked a little bit about the then and the now, but this is the real juicy stuff now, because everything else is sort of, that's painted us the picture of where you've been, where you are. But this is the question. We're not looking for the platitudes now. Oh, just work hard, everything's great. The actual nitty gritty, the sand in your shoe, the how part. How do you do it? How do you go from being a 7-year-old kid who goes, actually, do you know what? Yeah, I want to retire early. So what's the mechanism that takes you from being 7-year-old kid who wants to retire early and go on holiday once a year to actually achieving it? What are the steps, the actual steps that you've taken where you've gone, I did this and I got that outcome?
So I will explain it in more detail, but the reality for me is, and I tell everyone, you've got to take action every single day. And they sometimes think that's a bit willy-nilly, but it's true. Every single day we take action. So if I rewind back to 7, yeah, some people would say it's weird that I was like that, was already thinking in that way. Maybe it was. But the reality is I was constantly used to it. And I was looking at it and I was counting money. As a kid, I was getting my change out, I was counting it, I was wanting to learn. And what I realized, and this, I don't mean this disrespectfully to teachers, because this is generalization, what I'm about to say, but I had a couple of really moody, unhappy teachers when I was quite young. And I remember looking at them straight away, as young as I was about 9 at this point. And I remember thinking, you ain't even happy with your life. I didn't say this out loud,
Yeah.
but in my head, I was like, you're not even happy with your life. What am I going to learn from you? So for me, I took my own view and I said, I'm going to teach myself the stuff I need to teach. I understood education was important because you needed grades in those days. You don't really need them nowadays, but you needed grades to do certain things. So I went around trying to learn things. And that's where probably I was lucky that I had 2 hardworking parents where I could, because by the way, my siblings didn't do what I did. I've got 2 older brothers and 2 younger sisters, and I love them all. Unfortunately, one passed, my sister, but that I really took that opportunity. I was watching what they did, and I was quite skeptical in my head. I thought, well, you're not very good at that. You can imagine a kid thinking that. But I was thinking, you're not very good at that. But actually, what I was learning is things they weren't so good at. So I think, well, I need to be better than them at that.
Give us an example, Charlie. Give us something that you think, they weren't very good at that, and what you would have done better, or what you did do better.
My mum was far too giving. So as a business lady, she is actually a successful business lady, but she would have been far more successful if she understood the balance between business and giving. You've got to give to get, but the reality is, if you give everything away, then what have you got? She's too kind, too nice. It sounds bad to say someone is too nice and too kind, but the reality is, in business, people take advantage of you. And then from my dad, he's a great worker, but doesn't really understand money. Never learned how to read or write or do numbers. He knew how to make money, obviously, but he didn't have to keep it. So for me, I was looking at things from, my mum was phenomenal with paperwork and a great lady, great networker, great at building relationships. Didn't really understand how to monetize that. My dad, on the other hand, was also very good at a lot of things, but didn't understand how to keep hold of money. So for me, I was learning, and like I said, it does sound weird, but as a child, I was looking at this and thinking, well, I can learn a lot from my parents because I learn the things they're really good at. But also I'm looking at this and say, well, who's not? So then I went, my Uncle George is very good with money. So then when I was realizing my dad wasn't so good, and my uncle was really good, I used to bend his ear a lot as a child and ask him what he's doing, why he's doing this, and stuff like that. And so for me, it was about actually learning. Too many people want to be this trillionaire or financially free or whatever they want to call it, but they don't really want to do the work to get there. And they're lazy. There's a lot of laziness, a lot of excuses. As I already said, I use that word a lot, excuses. But I hear more excuses than anything in my day-to-day world. And the reality was, for me, to get from A to B, because I didn't have that money where someone said, here you are, here's this. Now, was I afraid to ask for money at an early age? Absolutely not. When I was 19 and I wanted to buy 2 properties, there was one that I was just about $4,000 short of. Now, most people think, oh, I can't do it. I thought there's a way I can do it. I mean, $4,000 in 2008 was probably a lot of money, but I thought, well, there's a way I can find $4,000, and I'm going to ask people for it, quite frankly.
So what did you do? Talk us through that mechanism, because that's the sort of sand in your shoe I'm interested in.
Yeah, and that's what I exactly did. I went out to friends and family, not my mum and dad, because I always appreciate what they've done for me in life, so I never really wanted to ask them for money. Whether they would have given it to me or not, I don't really know. But I had friends, family, nan. Also, I went to them and I told them my plan. I said, I'll give it back to you after this amount of time. And you can imagine as a young kid or 18-year-old, I was proposing this, that you could imagine that that's quite an unusual thing for an 18-year-old to be thinking about, especially back in 2008, by the way.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I teach loads of people to do stuff like this. But back then, I didn't have any education. There was no one really telling me to do these things. And I think you've got to think outside the box at times. You can't just think, oh, well, I've got no money. Well, how are we going to make it? That's the way I look at things. How are we going to make this money? Don't tell yourself, I've got no money. The reality is, okay, I don't have that money. But how can I get that money? What ways could I learn? And education does, and I don't mean the high school school education. Education is key. What took me 10 years to do, if I think about some of the people I've worked with in recent times, there's a couple of brothers that I've started working with recently, and they won't mind me saying this if they listen. But what took them 2 years to do, I told them how to do in one day. 2 years. I took out 2 years of what they've been faffing about with in one single day. So education is key. And the reality is it's just taking action and have those small steps and those small goals rather than just thinking, I want to be financially free. Okay, how much money is financially free to me? Is that $5,000 a month? Is that 10 grand a month? Is that whatever? And how am I going to get to that $5,000 a month? And then we work backwards. I'm very numbers driven. I done a thing. The Welsh government got me in a while ago to do a thing on a day in the life of me, basically. And I've done a lot of speaking events and what I did from the minute I wake up to go to bed. And another really cool thing to help you be successful, in my opinion, is to actually understand your timings. And what we've got is a lot of us like to spend lots of time wasting it in the zone of delusions and things like this, and really be accountable on yourself. So look at your week. It doesn't take you long to figure out your week. Look at your week. Where am I spending my time? Am I spending 4 hours a night on Netflix? Am I spending X hours looking at emails, not really answering emails? It doesn't take you long to figure out, I've got this much time in a week.
On that note, I mean, one of the things I laughed when you said that because my missus is an expert at real scrolling. I'll come out the shower and I'll be all fresh, and it's nighttime, and you're getting into the bedroom, and you're hopeful, and then your missus is watching 3.5 hours of bastard Love Island reels, or she's watching some
20,
dog
30,
doing
40
funny tricks.
reels.
Yeah, but she's going on and on and on. Oh my God.
I done a talk on that, and I said about all these things are doing is training your brain to be lazy, and so these are all things that obviously this is TikTok, Instagram, so forth. These are things that are newer, but there were still distractions from when I was younger, and again at a young age I was quite good at eliminating people from my life that don't relate to where I want to be, and I don't mean like physically removing them, but as a friendship group, as peers. If there was somebody who didn't, I'm very values driven. So if I think you're a dishonest person, me and you could be great friends. But if you do something that makes me think you're dishonest, you won't hear from me ever again.
Yeah.
And that's just the way I am. And I was like that as a child. I was thinking, wait a minute, if I want to walk really fast, I want to be around people that want to walk fast.
They've got to be on the same pace as you, haven't they? There's no point in them lagging behind.
Still like that today. I have different friendship groups. I've got my football friends who maybe aren't the business friends, and I've got my business friends. Don't get me wrong, it's good to have different groups, but I think the reality is if they don't have the same values as you, you shouldn't be wasting your time. So, and then it comes back into your daily routine, like you said, the scrolling. If people work with me, my rules are I only mentor 12 people a year, for example, and I won't do more, and because otherwise I can't dedicate my time to those people. But the rule is you have to at least a 30-minute power walk a day. And you have to read at least 10 pages of book a day, minimum. That's and they always say to me, yeah, but I don't want to be fit.
It's not the point though, is it?
No, and my point to them is what the exercise side does is release dopamine and the endorphins that make you feel good. And actually, it does help relieve stress and depressions and also just gets you thinking about things. If you're outside having a walk, you start thinking about things you wouldn't think of generally. And what the book does is teaching you to focus your brain. I don't care if you're actually learning anything from the book. You will tend to learn something from reading a book.
We're not talking about the hungry caterpillar here, though, are we? We're talking about a book of sort of substance.
Self-development, I tend to steer them to. But it's not about are they learning lots from this book. It's just what those 10 pages a day does is teach your brain to focus. And that's what I need from people. So to be successful, I genuinely believe you need to understand how to focus, and you need to understand how to take action. Because if you do that day in, day out, those small steps, how can I save £20 a day? That's your first thing. If you save something like £25 to £35 a day, I'd have to do the maths. Within 2 years, you'll have a deposit from a house. Now that might sound a lot of money, but there is ways to do that. If you've got a couple and you're earning X amount of money, if you're telling me you can't save that, then you're lying. Because what you're doing is making excuses for yourself. Because you've got a Sky for £120, and you've got Netflix for £10, and you've got Amazon for £10, and you've got Disney for £10, and you've got you smoke 4 packs of cigarettes a week, and tell you what, get rid of that nonsense and then start saving money for your future.
I think you've had the inside track to the Lazy Wealth podcast here by saying all of that, because we do quite a bit on that, the money saving part of what we do, and you're absolutely right.
It's the most common thing I get. I met a lady recently who asked for me to mentor her. And I always will meet you first before I mentor someone, because it's very personal. I actually want to make a change. I'm not doing it just to make money out of people.
Yeah.
And then she said to me, "God, you're quite expensive though." I was like, "You got to treat it as an investment. I'm not. Look, I don't mind if you use me or not, but the reality is, you've got that money. If you pay me that, you will make quadruple, probably more than quadruple out of it. So you've got to look at it as an investment. And I'm not saying use me, but find something that relates to you. Find someone that relates to you, and some will mentor you for free. If you're best mates, they might. But the most important thing is to not be ignorant to that, or arrogant towards that, or think you know better. Because I'm telling you what, you don't.
Absolutely.
If you think you know more than someone's been doing it for donkey's years, you don't. And some of the best things you will learn from a good mentor or a good coach or a good friend is think what not to do.
Learn from other people's mistakes is far better than learning from your own. Yeah,
that will save you a ton of money. So I think what I did at a young age is, like I said, surrounding myself with, and like I said, it probably was weird somewhat to even understand these things, but I just surrounded myself with people that I could learn from, good and bad, good and bad. And then if I didn't know someone, I put myself in the room with that person. It was like, okay, yeah, I need to know this type of person for me to get from A to B. And my first job at 17, when I said I was 16, but when I was 17 managing all those millions, there's a guy there called Nick, and he was a hypnotist. He was one of the directors, hypnotist, coach, and he was such a phenomenal skill. When he walked in a room and in a training event, and he just controlled the room. So most people in that company avoided him like the plague. They were scared of him. They thought, oh gosh, he's too. It was quite a weird mindset, in my opinion, because those are the sort of people you want to surround yourself with.
Absolutely. So how do you hypnotize that room? How do you get people listening to your every word? That's an interesting skill.
I did. At 17, I went in there, and don't get me wrong, I was always scared to enter his room because I knew he would watch and read everything I'd done, the way I talked, the way I presented myself, the way I stood, the way I sat, the way I was actually always nervous to see him. But I always put myself in that fear zone, because for me, what I learned from him was just for my career, it's probably made my career, because some of the things I learned from him at 16 and 17 really fundamentally helped me be ahead of anyone. Because suddenly, as a 17-year-old, I was managing millions of pounds worth of money, and also I had skills that 50-year-old men didn't have. So I'm doing things that these guys can't even tie my shoelaces with. So yeah, for me, it's another thing I probably didn't talk about, is that fear bubble. We all have these fear bubbles.
Get yourself out of that quickly. Get yourself out of that comfort zone. Yeah.
Yeah, average people, and you will stay, and as offensive as it might sound, you will stay average if you stay in it.
I reckon there's probably another talk we could do on all of this, to be honest, Charlie, because you and I, we have very similar thought processes. Some of them are slightly different, but that's okay. It's not about being in an echo chamber here. It's all about listening to other people's views. And the things that I've taken away from what was a really great conversation is about making sure that you take action, putting yourself in the right room, getting yourself out there, and start asking questions of money and of yourself as well. If you want to take action, it's like, oh, I've got to go to the gym, but should I go to the gym today? My answer would always be yes. Whether I do it or not might be different, of course. But that was absolutely brilliant, Charlie. I really am so grateful for your time. And again, I know I've already mentioned it at the beginning of the show, but for those of you who would like to follow Charlie, which I would strongly encourage you to do, go onto his Instagram. It's Charlie_Panayi with a silent I on the end. And you will get to see some great content there. And on behalf of myself and all of the listeners and viewers, Charlie, I just want to say how really grateful I am you've given up your time to spend with us today. And I really hope there's a part 2 to this discussion in the near future.
Yeah, 100%. I'll jump back on when you want me.
Brilliant. Maybe we can even do an in-person one in future, because I know we had
We did plan on it, didn't we? But my diary just pulled me all over the place.
But, you know, again, just, I know it's slightly an aside topic, but, you know, there's a lot of people who go, oh, you can't make it. Oh, never mind. Okay, we'll leave it then. But instead, it's just like, okay, we can't do that. But then how do we pivot on this? How do we make this work? We both want it to happen. How do we action that? And that's the difference in mindset between people who go, oh, they said no, we can't do that. Oh, okay, I'll just, you know, I'll go back and hide under the bed covers, versus the people that go, okay, you can't do that, but what's the solution? How can we work around this? How can we make it work? And then here we are. So brilliant.
100%.
Thanks so much for your time, Charlie. And I'll look forward to seeing you on the other side.